Hello everyone, I know you are going to use this video for falling asleep, so before that, like this video, subscribe to the channel, and let me know where you are from. Also, what time is it? The forest was never meant to be entered at dusk. Everyone in the town of Greywood knew that much. The sun sinking below the trees cast shadows that moved like living things, and the air grew thick with a silence so heavy it felt like a warning. Yet, for some, curiosity was a stronger force than fear. It started with a disappearance. Just a single person vanishing without a trace. No footprints, no struggle, nothing but an empty clearing in the woods where they had last been seen. Then came the whispers. Strange noises caught on old tape recorders, fleeting glimpses of figures watching from the dark, and a chilling sense that something walked just beyond the edges of sight when the light faded. In Greywood, tales of the forest were as old as the trees themselves. Stories told by the elders, stories too unsettling to be true, but too persistent to be dismissed. They spoke of a shadow that moved at dusk, an entity neither fully human nor beast. It was said to watch, to wait, and when the time was right, it took those who wandered too close to the edge. No one had seen it fully, only glimpses in the corner of the eye, or a pair of glowing eyes reflecting faintly in the dark. The forest seemed to breathe with it, alive in a way that made the hairs on your neck stand up. And yet, life went on. People carried on with their routines, and the disappearances were quietly filed away, like secrets best kept in the dark. Then came the night that changed everything. Lucas Harper was an outsider, a journalist chasing stories about the unexplained. He arrived in Greywood under the pretense of writing about small town legends, but was drawn deeper by the unsettling atmosphere. The townsfolk warned him not to stay past sunset, to leave the woods alone. But the hunger for truth pushed him forward. Lucas spent days interviewing locals, piecing together fragments of old tales and new fears. He heard about the one who walks at dusk, a name whispered in dread, and about those who had tried to follow it into the forest, never to return. Some said the entity was a curse. Others believed it was a guardian. Whatever it was watching. On the evening of his fourth day, Lucas decided to confront the forest himself. With a flashlight and a recorder, he stepped into the gathering gloom, each crunch of leaves beneath his boots echoing louder than it should. The forest seemed to close in around him, shadows lengthening, swallowing the last rays of sun. Hours passed, and the forest remained still. But then the whispers started, faint at first, then growing in urgency, like voices calling from far away but just beyond reach. Lucas's heart pounded as he followed the sounds deeper, feeling eyes on him from every direction. Suddenly, the silence shattered with a chilling scream. He spun around, flashlight beam slicing through the darkness, but saw nothing. Then movement, a flicker just beyond the trees, and the unmistakable shape of a figure, pale and twisted, slipping between the trunks. Lucas ran, branches clawing at his jacket, the forest alive with unseen things chasing him. When he finally burst out into the fading light of the town, he was breathless, shaken, and carrying a secret the forest was desperate to keep. But the story was far from over. Because the entity, the one who walks at dusk, was not done with Lucas. It was only just beginning to reach out. And in Greywood, the line between hunter and hunted was about to blur. The clock on the town hall struck 7 as Lucas set down his pack in the small rented room above the diner. His recorder, still warm from use, held the captured sounds, the whispering voices, the distant cries, the faint rustling of footsteps that weren't his own. He rewound, listening carefully, the hairs on his arms rising with each play. There was something in those sounds, something unnatural. His notebook was a mess of scribbles, sketches of shadowy figures, and notes on local legends. Among them, one name appeared repeatedly: Aloan Crow, the old woman who had lived on the edge of the woods for as long as anyone could remember. Townsfolk spoke of her with a mix of fear and reverence, claiming she knew the forest's darkest secrets. Lucas decided to find her. The night air was cold and still as he walked to the edge of town, where Eloan's cottage sat like a relic swallowed by the trees. The windows glowed faintly, and smoke curled from the chimney. He knocked, the sound swallowed quickly by the heavy silence. The door creaked open, revealing a frail woman with sharp eyes that seemed to pierce straight through him. "You shouldn't be here," she said, voice low but steady. "Not at this hour, and not with the questions you carry." Lucas swallowed his fear. "I need to understand what's happening in these woods. People are disappearing. Something's out there." Eloan's eyes darkened. The woods remember, and the woods take. The one who walks at dusk does not forgive curiosity. She beckoned him inside. The cottage was cluttered with old books, jars filled with strange herbs, and faded photographs of the forest. On the table lay a worn journal, its pages yellowed with age. "This was my husband's," Eloan said, her voice trembling. "He vanished in these woods many years ago. He chased the same shadow you seek." Lucas opened the journal. The first entry dated decades ago. The words spoke of strange lights, eerie sounds, and a growing sense of being watched. The entries grew more frantic, describing a presence that followed him at night, a darkness that seeped into his mind until he was no longer sure what was real. Then, the last entry, a warning scrawled in shaky handwriting. "Do not look into the eyes of the one who walks at dusk." Lucas felt a chill as he closed the journal. What happens if you do? Eloan's gaze dropped. You lose yourself. Become part of the forest's hunger. Outside, the wind began to howl, carrying with it the unmistakable sound of footsteps circling the cottage. Lucas's heart raced. The forest was calling. The shadow was near. He had come seeking answers, but now he understood the price of those answers, and the night was far from over. The forest waited. The one who walks at dusk was patient, and Lucas Harper was about to learn what it truly meant to be hunted. The wind was sharp against Lucas's face as he stepped back out into the night. The cottage door shut behind him with a final, echoing creak, and for a moment the world felt suspended, held in the quiet just before a storm breaks. But the forest didn't wait. It moved. His breath came in ragged gasps as the weight of unseen eyes pressed against him. The hairs on his neck stood tall, a primal warning he tried to ignore. Somewhere between the skeletal trunks and tangled branches, the shadow was stirring, watching, calculating. Lucas gripped his flashlight tighter, its narrow beam slicing through the dense darkness. Each step forward felt like crossing a threshold, leaving the fragile safety of the known behind. The path beneath his boots, once clear and trodden, now disappeared into a mass of gnarled roots and creeping vines that threatened to pull him down. The voices he had recorded earlier whispered again, faint and fractured, drifting on the cold breeze like lost memories, trying to claw their way back. "Don't look, don't." The words tangled in his mind, drowning his rational thoughts. He forced himself to breathe, to focus, to remember Eloan's warning, "Do not look into the eyes of the one who walks at dusk." But how do you avoid eyes when they glow in the dark? As he ventured deeper, the trees closed in, twisting overhead so tightly the moonlight could barely touch the forest floor. Shadows shifted with every flicker of his flashlight, and Lucas felt his heart tighten in his chest. Something brushed past the edge of the light. A quick movement, like a breath of cold air, and then silence. His hands trembled as he raised the flashlight again, sweeping the beam in a wide arc. Nothing but blackness stared back. Then, a sudden sound. A low, guttural growl that rumbled from the depths of the forest like a warning, and the unmistakable crunch of footsteps breaking twigs behind him. Lucas didn't wait. He spun around, flashlight stabbing wildly into the shadows, but the figure was gone. Panic surged, adrenaline flooding his veins. He broke into a run, branches slapping his arms, roots tripping him. The forest alive with unseen menace. He didn't stop until he burst into a small clearing, gasping for breath, drenched in sweat despite the chill. His eyes darted wildly, searching for any sign of the presence that stalked him. And then he saw it. Eyes. Two, or maybe more, shining like embers in the dark, fixed on him from the far edge of the clearing. They weren't human eyes. Too large, too cold, with a flickering depth that sent ice crawling down his spine. Lucas froze, every instinct screaming to turn and run. But something rooted him to the spot, a mixture of terror and a strange, dark fascination. The eyes blinked. A figure stepped forward, materializing from the shadows like a nightmare made flesh. Tall, gaunt, draped in ragged shadows that seemed to crawl along its skin. The entity's face was half, hidden beneath a hood of tangled branches and leaves. Its mouth twisted into a cruel smile, revealing rows of teeth sharper than any predator's. "You seek answers," it said in a voice that was both whisper and roar, sounding like the rustle of dead leaves and the crack of dry twigs. Lucas swallowed hard. What are you?" The figure tilted its head. "I am the shadow that walks when the sun dies. The hunger beneath the bark, the watcher of those who trespass. Why take them? Why disappear them?" Lucas's voice cracked with fear and desperation. "Because the forest remembers. The forest demands a price. Curiosity feeds the hunger. And tonight, you are the feast." The words were a death sentence. Lucas's mind screamed for escape, but his legs refused to obey. The forest closed around him, the shadows creeping closer, swallowing the faint glow of his flashlight. Suddenly, the figure lunged, not at Lucas, but toward the ground. The earth erupted as roots burst free, writhing like serpents, reaching up to trap him. Lucas struggled, fighting the creeping grasp of the forest itself. His hands clawed at the dirt, his lungs burned, but the roots pulled tighter, dragging him down into the dark soil. In that moment, Lucas's vision tunneled, and the world fell into a cold, suffocating black. When he came to, the forest was silent again, eerily so. The sky above was a sickly gray, and the air tasted of decay. But Lucas was not where he had fallen. He was inside the forest, but the trees here were twisted and grotesque, their bark slick with something dark and wet. The ground beneath him pulsed softly, like a heartbeat beneath the earth. A soft voice called his name. Lucas. He looked up, searching for the source. From the shadows stepped a figure, Aloan. But she was different. Her eyes were glazed, empty of the sharp fire they once held. Her voice was hollow, distant. "You shouldn't be here?" she repeated, but this time it was a warning born from something beyond human fear. Lucas wanted to run, but his limbs were heavy, slow, as if the forest itself weighed him down. "Aloan, what's happening?" he whispered. She reached out, her fingers cold as ice as they brushed his cheek. "The forest has claimed you. You belong to it now. The one who walks at dusk doesn't take lightly. It feeds on the lost, the curious, the desperate. Is there a way out?" Her eyes flickered with a faint spark. A shadow of the woman he met before. Maybe, but not without cost. The ground trembled beneath them, and from the depths, a low growl rose. A sound that promised the hunt was far from over. Lucas's nightmare was only just beginning. Lucas's breath came out in sharp, ragged bursts as the cold earth beneath him seemed to pulse in rhythm with his heartbeat. The twisted forest around him whispered secrets in voices only the wind dared carry, an ancient language that scratched at the edges of his sanity. Every instinct screamed that he was trapped in a place no one should ever wander. But the chilling truth was this: the forest wasn't just alive. It was hungry. Aloan's vacant eyes flickered once more, and a flicker of recognition passed through the empty haze. "You don't understand," she said softly, the ghost of her old voice struggling through the void. "This place, it's more than just trees and shadows. It's a prison. and the one who walks at dusk is its warden. Lucas shook his head, desperate to cling to the reality he knew. You said there might be a way out. What is it? Tell me, please. Her lips parted in a bitter smile. Freedom comes with sacrifice. Before he could ask what that meant, a distant sound tore through the silence. A slow, deliberate tapping. Like fingers drumming on ancient bark, the noise grew louder, closer, and Lucas's gaze darted wildly. Out of the shadows emerged a figure, but not one he expected. It wasn't the monstrous creature that had trapped him. Instead, it was a man, worn and hollow-eyed, dressed in the ragged clothes of someone who had been lost here far too long. His skin was pale, almost translucent, and his movements were sluggish, like a puppet jerked by invisible strings. I'm not the first to wander here, the man rasped, voice cracked and raw. And I won't be the last. Lucas felt a cold shiver crawl up his spine. Who are you? Some call me Thomas, he said, eyes flicking to Eloan as if she held a secret he feared to confront. But names don't matter anymore. Not in this place. The three stood in silence, the oppressive weight of the forest pressing down like a storm ready to break. Then Thomas began to speak, his voice barely above a whisper. The one who walks at dusk. It's not just a hunter. It's the forest's curse. A creature born from centuries of forgotten pain and broken promises. It collects souls like a miser collects coins, feeding on those who dare enter its domain after sundown. Lucas's mind reeled. But why? Why does it do this? Thomas's gaze darkened. Because the forest remembers every betrayal, every blood spilled beneath its boughs, and it demands repayment. Is there a way to break it? Lucas asked, hope flickering. Thomas shook his head slowly. There was once a way to end the curse, but it was lost, buried beneath layers of fear and silence. Eloan's hollow voice interrupted. The key lies in the past, in the stories no one dares tell. Lucas swallowed, the weight of the unknown crushing down on him. Then we have to find those stories. Whatever it takes. As the trio moved deeper into the forest's grasp, the trees seemed to close in tighter, their branches glowing at the fading light. And somewhere, in the distance, the unmistakable sound of footsteps followed, slow, patient, relentless. The hunt was far from over. Hours passed, or maybe days. Time twisted in this place where the sun's warmth was only a fading memory. Lucas, Eloan, and Thomas pressed on, their steps cautious, senses heightened. The forest whispered warnings, and every shadow threatened to pull them under. They came to an old stone altar, moss-covered and cracked, nestled in a forgotten clearing. Ancient symbols were carved deep into its surface, glowing faintly as if imbued with some lingering power. Thomas knelt beside it, tracing the runes with trembling fingers. This is a marker, a reminder of what once was, a pact between man and forest. Eloan's eyes sparkled briefly, the faintest spark of life returning. If we can restore the pact, maybe the curse will break. Lucas felt a surge of determination. Then we have to try. For all of us. But the forest had other plans. A sudden roar shattered the fragile silence, and the ground shook beneath their feet. From the shadows, the creature emerged, the one who walks at dusk, tall, monstrous, eyes blazing with an ancient fury. Its mouth opened in a silent scream, and the air grew thick with menace. Lucas's heart pounded in his chest. This was the moment of truth. Fight or be swallowed by the darkness forever. The monstrous figure stood tall against the dim light that filtered through the dense canopy, its form blotting out what little moonlight dared to reach the forest floor. The one who walks at dusk, a name whispered by terrified villagers and avoided in every fearful conversation, was no longer a shadow on the edge of Lucas's world. It was a looming nightmare, flesh and bone wrapped in twisted bark and shadow, with eyes that burned like dying stars. Lucas swallowed hard, muscles coiled, ready to run or fight, whichever the moment demanded. But before he could move, Aloan stepped forward, her pale eyes locked onto the creature's blazing gaze. For a moment, the forest seemed to hold its breath. "You don't belong here," she said, voice low but sharp, as if cutting through a thick veil of silence. "Leave us." The creature's growl echoed like thunder, but instead of advancing, it hesitated. A strange energy crackled between them, a tense standoff born of something deeper than anger, a recognition, perhaps, or a lingering thread of the past. Thomas, still kneeling by the altar, looked up with a sudden clarity that Lucas hadn't seen before. It knows her. It's drawn to her. Eloan's hand trembled as she reached into the folds of her tattered coat and pulled out a small, weathered pendant, an old, faded emblem of a twisted tree wrapped in roots. The pendant glowed faintly, casting eerie shadows over the moss-covered stone. "This belonged to my family," Eloan whispered. "It's part of the old pact. It's supposed to protect us, or at least hold the creature back." The one who walks at dusk snarled again, but the glow from the pendant seemed to burn through the thick darkness enveloping the beast. The creature's body writhed, as if fighting against an invisible chain, and the forest itself seemed to shudder in response. Lucas took a cautious step closer. "Then maybe that pact isn't lost after all." Eloan nodded, eyes fixed on the creature. "But it's fragile. If it breaks completely, the forest will consume everything." Thomas looked between them, a grim shadow crossing his face. "We need to restore the full pact. The symbols on this altar, they're part of it. But to complete the ritual, we have to find the missing words. The forgotten names." "The names?" Lucas asked. "Whose names?" "The original guardians," Eloan said. "The people who made the pact with the forest centuries ago. Their names were carved into the stones around here, but time has buried them deep. If we don't find them, the curse will only grow stronger." A sudden crack echoed through the trees. The creature's patience snapped, and it lunged, branches like claws tearing through the air toward them. Lucas barely dodged, heart hammering against his ribs. "Run!" Thomas shouted, but running meant splitting up, and the forest was no place for division. Instead, Lucas grabbed Eloan's arm. "We do this together." Eloan hesitated but nodded. They sprinted toward the altar, clutching the pendant tightly as the creature's furious roars chased them, the ground trembling beneath its steps. Around the clearing, faint carvings glimmered faintly, almost lost beneath moss and decay. Lucas ran his fingers over the nearest symbol. A twisted, knot-like design, it pulsed beneath his touch, and the forest seemed to sigh, as if waking from a long sleep. "Eloan, help me with this," he said, urgency sharpening his voice. Together, they traced the symbols. Feeling the weight of centuries pressing down, each mark told a story, fragments of names, and places long forgotten, but alive in this living nightmare. But then the creature was upon them again, and the ground cracked where it stepped, sending roots twisting up like serpents aiming to bind them. Panic surged through Lucas as he struggled to break free. Eloan raised the pendant high, and a beam of pale light shot from it, slicing through the darkness. The roots recoiled, the beast snarled in pain, and the altar's carvings flared, glowing brighter than before. "The names," Eloan gasped. "They're coming back." The forest trembled, the shadows retreating as a new power stirred in the clearing. Lucas could only hope it was enough, because the night was far from over, and the one who walks at dusk would not give up its prey without a final, merciless fight. The cold sweat trickled down Lucas's back as the glow from Eloan's pendant pulsed rhythmically, casting eerie light onto the ancient carvings. The air hung thick with a silence so heavy it felt suffocating, like the forest itself was holding its breath, waiting for what would come next. Around them, the roots writhed and twined, like living serpents desperate to reclaim the ground they once ruled. But something in the clearing was changing. Aloan's voice broke the stillness. The names, they're starting to return. We're awakening something, or someone. Lucas's heart hammered, the pounding echoing like distant drums in the woods. Who are these guardians? What did they promise? She glanced up, eyes wide and unblinking in the half-light. Balance. Protection. A truce between man and forest. But something fractured it long ago. Before Lucas could ask more, a whisper slipped through the trees, soft like the rustling of dead leaves. At first, he thought it was the wind. Then the words became clearer, forming from the shadows. Leave this place. The pact is broken. Beware the Watcher. Lucas gripped Aloan's arm tighter. Did you hear that? She nodded, pale lips pressed together. They're warning us. The Watchers aren't just stories. From the darkness beyond the clearing, shapes began to materialize. Figures cloaked in tattered robes, faces obscured by twisted branches and decayed leaves. They moved with unnerving silence, stepping from the shadows like ghosts summoned from the earth itself. Lucas's breath hitched. Who? What are they? Aloan whispered. The first guardians. Bound to the forest. Cursed to watch over it forever. One of the figures stepped forward, and from beneath the hood emerged a hollowed face, neither fully alive nor dead. Eyes like empty wells that sucked in the fading light. You trespass where you should not. The voice was hollow and distant, as if coming from beneath layers of earth. The pact is no longer. The forest is hungry. It consumes all who defy its will. Lucas took a step back, the pendant growing hot in Aloan's hand. We want to fix the pact. To save the village. To stop the darkness. The figure's empty gaze seemed to pierce through him. The pact was broken by greed and fear. You cannot undo what has been lost. The one who walks at dusk feeds on your hope. Suddenly, a scream cut through the air, raw and desperate. From the edge of the clearing, Thomas stumbled into view, blood trickling down his temple, eyes wild with terror. They're coming, the others, he gasped. The lost souls, they want to drag us under. Lucas barely had time to react before shadows spilled over Thomas's form, twisting and pulling, tendrils of darkness wrapping around him like chains. His screams echoed into the night as the forest swallowed him whole. No, Aloan cried, raising the pendant high. A burst of light erupted, scattering the shadows for a moment, but the figures only paused briefly before closing in again. Lucas felt the cold bite of fear settle deep in his bones. They were trapped, caught between the ancient guardians who offered no mercy and the lurking horror that hunted them relentlessly. We have to find the missing names, Aloan urged, voice trembling but firm. Only by naming them can we restore the pact. Lucas's mind raced. The carvings around the altar, they held fragments, but something was missing. A key to the past buried beneath layers of time and tragedy. We split up, Lucas said, swallowing his fear. Aloan, you keep the pendant safe. I'll search the northern ridge for more clues. No, she protested. Alone. We don't have a choice. He shook his head, the weight of the moment pressing down like the suffocating forest canopy. If we don't find the names, none of this ends well. With that, he broke away, plunging into the thick woods. The branches clawed at his skin, and the darkness pressed in like a living thing. Every step was a gamble. Every sound could mean death. But somewhere deep within the forest, something watched. The one who walks at dusk had not yet finished its hunt. The cold seeped into Lucas's bones as he pushed deeper into the dense forest, his breath puffing out in ragged clouds beneath the suffocating canopy. Every crack of a twig beneath his boots sounded like a gunshot. The woods felt alive, hostile, watching him, waiting for him to slip, to falter. His fingers brushed against a gnarled tree trunk, rough and ancient, its bark riddled with strange symbols. The same markings from the altar clearing. He traced the worn carvings, feeling the grooves under his skin, as if the tree itself was trying to tell him a secret. But the forest offered no answers, only whispers. The further he went, the heavier the silence grew. No bird song, no rustling leaves, just the crunch of his own footsteps and the distant howl of something he dared not name. His mind churned with questions. Who were the missing names? Why had the pact been broken? What exactly was this one who walks at dusk? A shiver ran down his spine. Suddenly, a faint light flickered through the trees, a candle's fragile glow. Lucas's pulse quickened as he followed it cautiously, every nerve alert. At the edge of a small clearing, he found it an old cabin, half sunken into the earth and draped in creeping vines. The window was cracked, but inside, the dim candlelight cast wavering shadows across a cluttered table. On the table lay a weathered book, its leather cover cracked with age. Lucas reached out, hesitating as if the forest itself might snatch it away. His fingers closed around the spine, and the candle flickered violently, plunging the room into near darkness before steadying again. He opened the book carefully. The pages were brittle, covered in faded ink and sketches, drawings of strange figures, twisted trees, and symbols matching the carvings on the altar. Names scrawled alongside them, some crossed out, others underlined with urgency. Lucas's eyes widened as he recognized a name, his own family's. The ancestors who had once lived here were part of the pact. Their names were inscribed among the guardians, but one name stood apart, circled in thick red ink: Eleonora. No last name, no details, just that single word, a lingering shadow across the page. The candle guttered, and a sudden gust slammed the cabin door shut, throwing the room into darkness. Lucas's heart thundered. He scrambled to relight the candle, hands trembling. When the flame finally caught, he saw it, scratches on the floor leading toward a trapdoor beneath the table. With shaking hands, he lifted it, revealing a narrow staircase spiraling down into blackness. A voice echoed in his mind, distant but unmistakable. Find the forgotten. He took a breath, then descended, each step swallowing the fragile candlelight. Below, the air was thick with decay and the unmistakable scent of damp earth. The stairs opened into a cavernous chamber, walls slick with moss and ancient roots. At the center, an altar of stone held dozens of small wooden plaques, each etched with a name. Lucas scanned the names, but many were chipped, worn, or missing entirely. Then he heard it, a soft rustling from the shadows. He froze. From the darkness, a figure emerged, draped in tattered robes, eyes gleaming with cold fire. You shouldn't have come here, it whispered, voice like the cracking of dead leaves. Lucas's blood ran cold. The one who walks at dusk was not just a story. It was real. And it was waiting. Lucas's breath hitched as the figure stepped closer, the shadows clinging to its form like a second skin. The flickering candlelight revealed a face gaunt and pale, eyes sunken but burning with an unnatural fire that seemed to pierce through the darkness itself. You shouldn't have come here, the figure repeated, voiced barely more than a rasp. Yet it reverberated through the chamber like a cold warning. Lucas swallowed hard, his fingers tightening around the candle. The wooden plaques on the altar seemed to vibrate faintly under his gaze, as if alive, whispering names he wasn't meant to hear. Who are you? Lucas managed to say, trying to steady his voice. The figure hesitated, then tilted its head. I am what remains when the pact is broken. The Watcher, the Sentinel. I am bound to this place, waiting for the debt to be paid. A chill swept the chamber, freezing the air around them. Lucas's mind raced, piecing together the fragments he'd uncovered. The broken pact, the missing names, the warning carved in blood, red ink. All pointed to a debt owed long ago, a promise betrayed, and a curse unleashed. But why me? Lucas whispered, stepping back instinctively. Because your blood runs through these woods, the figure answered, voice thick with ancient sorrow. Your ancestors swore an oath, but their silence invited this darkness. Now the price must be claimed anew. Suddenly, the plaques on the altar began to glow, a faint but eerie light emanating from the carved names. Lucas's eyes locked on his own family name, shimmering and twisting as if alive. Next to it, the name Eleonora pulsed brighter, as though calling out to him. The figure raised a skeletal hand, and the room's temperature plummeted. You must find her, the forgotten. She holds the key to the curse. Only then can this nightmare end. Lucas's heart pounded in his chest. The forgotten. The name that had haunted him since the moment he opened that book. But how? He asked desperately. The figure's eyes flickered. Follow the signs. But beware, what you seek is not alone. The forest hungers and it does not forgive. With that, the figure dissolved into the shadows, leaving Lucas alone in the silent chamber. The plaques dimmed, and the air grew heavy again. He knew there was no turning back. Outside, the forest awaited, dark, endless, and filled with secrets waiting to devour him whole. The forest outside the cabin seemed to pulse with a life of its own. Shadows weaving between the trees like restless spirits. Lucas emerged from the trapdoor, heart still pounding from his encounter with the spectral sentinel. His breath came in sharp bursts, the cold night air biting at his skin as if warning him to flee. But he couldn't. Not yet. He clutched the ancient book to his chest, the fragile pages whispering secrets he could barely grasp. The name Eleonora haunted him. Her presence felt like a thread pulling him deeper into a labyrinth he wasn't sure he wanted to enter. Lucas stepped back into the clearing, eyes scanning the darkness beyond the faint glow of the cabin's candlelight. Somewhere, hidden beneath the veil of night, lay the path he had to follow. The signs. The forgotten. His gaze caught something, a faint glimmer on the ground near the tree line. Kneeling, he found a small, worn charm carved from bone, etched with symbols matching those in the book and on the altar. The coldness of it seeped into his palm, sending a shiver down his spine. He pocketed the charm and began to walk, the dense woods closing in around him. Every step felt like a descent into a nightmare, the silence broken only by the distant howl of the wind. Or was it something else? A low, guttural growl, a whisper just beyond hearing. The further he ventured, the more oppressive the forest became. Trees twisted unnaturally, their branches clawing at the sky like desperate fingers. Shadows moved just beyond his vision, vanishing whenever he turned to look. Lucas's mind raced. What had his ancestors done to bind this darkness here? And what was the true cost of breaking the pact? Suddenly, a voice echoed through the trees, a soft, melodic whisper that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. Lucas! He froze. The name was on the wind, a faint call drawing him deeper. Who's there? He demanded, his voice cracking. No answer, only the rustling of leaves and the distant cry of an owl. Lucas forced himself forward, driven by a mix of fear and desperate hope. Then, through the branches, he glimpsed a figure, a woman cloaked in white, her form barely visible under the moonlight. She stood motionless, watching. Eleonora, Lucas whispered. She vanished before he could reach her, leaving only a chill and the faint scent of earth and decay. His heart thundered. The forgotten was real, and she was waiting. As dawn approached, Lucas realized the forest's grip was tightening. The journey had only just begun, and the deeper he went, the darker the secrets would become. Lucas stumbled forward, branches tearing at his clothes and skin, the forest seeming to close behind him like a living trap. The weight of the ancient book pressed heavy in his pack, its pages screaming silent warnings only he could hear. The chill in the air wasn't just cold. It was the breath of something that had waited too long. He paused where the path forked beneath towering oaks, the moonlight casting long fingers across the dirt. The whispered name, Eleonora, still echoed in his mind, an invitation or a curse. Which, he wasn't sure. His fingers traced the carved bone charm tucked in his pocket, its rough edges grounding him against the panic rising like poison in his chest. The symbols matched those in the book, the same symbols carved on the altar where the figure had warned him. They were a map or a key, something meant to lead him. But lead where? Lucas swallowed his fear and took the left fork, feeling the forest gaze settle on him like 1,000 unseen eyes. The sounds of the night twisted around him, a twig snapping far off, a low murmur that might have been a breeze or a voice. Suddenly, the ground beneath him gave way. He fell hard, his breath knocked out, landing in a pit cloaked in darkness deeper than the night itself. Panic surged, but as his eyes adjusted, he made out rough stone walls and a narrow wooden ladder descending further into shadow. There was no turning back. Climbing down, Lucas's hands trembled as he lit a match. The flame revealed a cavern lined with faded murals, twisted figures bound in chains, faces frozen in eternal torment. At the center lay a stone slab, cracked and worn, with more names etched alongside his family's and Eleonora's. A voice slithered from the shadows. "You've come far, Lucas. But the price isn't paid with bravery alone." From the gloom stepped a woman, her face pale, eyes dark pools of sorrow and fury. She was Eleonora. "You're bound to this, as much as I am. To break the curse, we must uncover what was stolen, and face what waits in the deepest dark." Lucas felt the weight of generations settle on his shoulders. The forest was no longer just trees and shadows. It was a prison, a battlefield, and a graveyard, and now, so was he. The air in the cavern was thick with a damp, choking heaviness. Lucas's breath came out in short bursts, visible in the faint flicker of the matchlight. Eleonora's eyes, black and hollow, held his with a gaze that both implored and warned. "Why show yourself now?" Lucas demanded, voice trembling. "Why me?" Her lips curled into a bitter smile, like one born from centuries of anguish. "Because you carry the bloodline that shackled me here. Your ancestors made a pact, a bargain sealed with blood and silence. I was the price." Lucas swallowed, the bitter taste of guilt rising. "A pact? What kind of bargain?" Eleonora stepped closer, her presence colder than the cavern's chill. "The kind that feeds on souls and darkens hearts. Your family promised to protect these woods, but at a cost. The curse twisted everything it touched, and I became its prisoner." She reached out, her fingers brushing the cracked stone slab. "These names, they're those who tried to undo what was done. All disappeared into the forest's depths. All vanished." A shudder passed through Lucas. He thought of his grandfather's hushed warnings, the stories no one dared speak aloud. The forest wasn't just haunted, it was alive and hungry. "What do you want from me?" he asked, voice barely above a whisper. "To finish what was begun, to break the chains. But you must choose to run and live with the burden of knowledge, or to fight and risk becoming another name on this slab." Before Lucas could respond, the cavern walls trembled. A low, guttural growl echoed, growing louder. Shadows twisted, shapes forming in the corners of his vision. Creatures born from nightmare, drawn to the scent of the bloodline. Eleonora grabbed his arm, eyes fierce. No time to hesitate. Together, they raced toward a narrow tunnel carved deep into the earth, the sounds of pursuit crashing behind them. Each step echoed with a warning. Some doors, once opened, refused to close. Lucas's heart hammered. This was no longer about legacy or family. It was survival. And the forest was just getting started. The narrow tunnel felt endless, its walls slick with moisture and smeared with strange, dark stains that looked almost like dried blood. Lucas's lungs burned as he forced himself to keep moving, his footsteps barely muffled against the cold stone floor. Behind him, the chilling sounds of pursuit grew louder, the twisted creatures from the shadows, their snarls and scraping claws scraping the walls. Eleonora's grip on his arm was firm, guiding him deeper into the darkness, but her face remained calm, almost resigned. It was as if she had walked this path before, trapped in a loop of despair and hope. "Where are we going?" Lucas gasped between breaths. "To the heart of the forest's secret," she replied. "The place where the pact was forged, where the darkness began." They turned a corner, and Lucas's match flickered out. Darkness swallowed him whole, but Eleonora produced a faint glow, a small orb of light that hovered just above her palm, casting eerie shadows on the ancient walls. As they moved forward, the air grew colder still, so cold it felt as if the very life was being sucked from his veins. Whispers drifted in the gloom, voices barely audible. Speaking in tongues Lucas couldn't understand. They clawed at his mind, dragging up memories that weren't his. Visions of sacrifices, desperate bargains, and twisted rituals performed long ago. Then, suddenly, the tunnel opened into a cavern vast and hollow, lit by flickering torches embedded in the walls. At its center stood an altar carved from black stone, stained with centuries' old dried blood. Strange runes circled its base, pulsating faintly as if alive. Lucas's heart lurched. This was the place from the book. The altar his ancestors had built, the site of the unholy covenant. Eleonora's voice cut through the silence. "This is where the curse was born. The only way to end it is to destroy the altar, but it won't be that simple." Before Lucas could ask why, the cavern shuddered violently. From the shadows emerged the grotesque figures chasing them, half human, half beast, eyes glowing with malice. "We have to fight," Eleonora said, drawing a shimmering blade of light that seemed to cut through the darkness itself. Lucas reached for the charm in his pocket. The bone talisman, etched with the same runes as the altar. Its cold surface felt alive, humming with power. The creatures lunged. Time slowed. This was no longer a question of courage or fear. It was a fight for everything he'd ever known. For the truth buried deep within the woods. For the chance to end the nightmare forever. The cavern exploded into chaos. Lucas barely had time to steady his breath before the first beast lunged, its twisted claws scraping sparks from the stone floor. The smell of decay and something far older, rot mingled with a bitter metallic tang, flooded the air. Eleonora moved with a fluid precision, her glowing blade slicing through the nightmarish forms like a beacon of defiance. Lucas, clutching the bone talisman, felt its cold pulse synchronize with his racing heartbeat. The runes etched deep into the bone flickered faintly, as if waking from a long slumber. His eyes darted around, searching for a weakness in the creatures that were now encircling them, snarling with hunger and fury. Suddenly, one of the beasts, the largest, with eyes burning bright like coals, reared back and roared, sending a shockwave that rattled the cavern walls. Lucas stumbled, nearly dropping the talisman. The beast's gaze locked on him, fixating on the bloodline he carried like a beacon in the darkness. Eleonora's voice cut through the din, sharp and commanding. "You must place the talisman on the altar. Only there will its power be unleashed." His mind screamed with doubt and fear. But something primal surged through him, the need to end this, to break free from the chains that had bound his family for generations. He broke from the circle, sprinting toward the altar as claws swiped close behind. The bone talisman felt like ice in his palm, heavy with the weight of countless souls and whispered prayers. The creatures howled in rage, but Eleonora held them back, moving like a shadow, a specter fueled by centuries of torment. Lucas reached the altar, heart pounding in his ears. The runes on the black stone glowed brighter, reacting to the presence of the talisman. With trembling hands, he pressed it into the carved recess at the altar's base. A pulse of energy rippled outward, a shockwave of light and sound that shattered the cavern's silence. The creatures screeched, reeling as the altar began to crack. Dark veins of corruption fracturing and bleeding away. But just as hope flickered within Lucas, a terrible truth slammed into him. This was only the beginning. From the fractured altar, a deep, guttural voice echoed through the cavern, reverberating in their bones. You think you can undo what was made in blood. The shadows twisted and wreathed, coalescing into a figure both terrifying and mesmerizing, an ancient presence older than the forest itself. Lucas realized then the forest nightmare was awake, and it was hungry for more than just souls. The ancient voice lingered like a shadow over the cavern, filling the air with a darkness that pressed against Lucas's chest, making every breath a battle. The twisted figure that had emerged from the fractured altar seemed woven from the very essence of the forest's oldest fears, its eyes glowing like dying embers, and its form shifting between the shape of man and beast in a terrifying dance. Lucas could feel something inside him stir, a raw and ancient power clawing its way to the surface, as if the blood of his ancestors was calling out from deep within his veins. The talisman burned cold in his palm, the runes now pulsing in defiance against the darkness before him. Eleonora stepped forward, blade raised high. "It's the warden," she whispered fiercely. "The spirit bound to the forest's curse. It feeds on our fear and pain, growing stronger with every soul it claims. Destroy the altar and you break its hold, but it will not surrender without a fight." The cavern trembled as the warden's voice rolled over them again, a sound like cracked timber and howling wind. "You cannot sever the roots that bind me. This forest is my domain. Your blood is mine." Lucas's mind raced, a torrent of memories and whispers flooding in. The stories his grandmother told, the warnings scribbled in the margins of the old family journals. The warden was no mere legend. It was the heart of the darkness that had haunted his bloodline for centuries, a shadow that reached far beyond the woods, into the very soul of his family. Suddenly, the cavern's walls seemed to breathe, the flickering torches casting dancing shadows that morphed into twisted faces and reaching hands. The ground beneath Lucas's feet cracked open, revealing deep roots, gnarled and blackened, winding like serpents toward the altar. Eleonora shouted, "Focus!" The talisman must break the connection, strike the altar's core. Lucas swallowed hard, gripping the talisman tighter. With a surge of determination, he pressed it deeper into the altar's recess, and a blinding light erupted, tearing through the cavern like a thunderclap. The warden screamed, a sound of fury and agony that shook the very earth. The roots writhed, splintering and curling away from the altar. Shadows peeled back like curtains, revealing the ancient stone beneath. Then silence. The cavern fell still, the oppressive weight lifted for a moment, like a breath held and released. But as Lucas turned to Eleonora, his heart sank. The warden's eyes flickered open, now inside him. A chilling realization struck him. Breaking the altar did not end the curse. It had only found a new vessel. And now, Lucas was the forest's new warden. A suffocating silence pressed down on Lucas as the last echoes of the cavern's collapse faded. His breath came shallow, each inhale sharper than the last, and an unbearable weight settled deep in his chest, as if the very forest had planted its roots within him. The cold bone talisman slipped from his grasp, clattering to the stone floor like a dropped promise. Eleonora's eyes widened, and she took a cautious step back. "Lucas, what's happening?" Her voice trembled, caught between fear and disbelief. He barely heard her because a strange voice, low, guttural, yet unmistakably his own, whispered inside his mind. It was a voice both alien and hauntingly familiar, twisting his thoughts with whispers of ancient secrets and unspeakable power. The forest was no longer just around him. It was inside him. Images flashed behind his eyelids, endless groves drowning in shadow, gnarled roots tightening like chains, faces lost to time begging for release. He staggered, clutching his head as the voice clawed for dominance, promising strength but demanding submission. Eleonora reached out, her hand trembling as it brushed his arm. "Lucas, fight it! Don't let it take you!" But the voice spoke again, soothing and sinister. "You belong to me now. Your blood, your pain, they feed me." Together, we will reign over the wood forever." Desperation surged in Lucas. This was no longer a battle for survival. It was a war for his very soul. He stumbled toward the cavern's shattered altar, where shards of blackened stone pulsed faintly with dying energy. The talisman lay near, cold and inert, its power drained but not defeated. "Maybe," Lucas muttered, voice hoarse. "Maybe it's not about fighting alone." Eleonora nodded, her fierce gaze never leaving him. "You must harness what's inside. Control it. Otherwise, it will consume you." The forest outside the cavern groaned, branches scraping like claws against the wind. Somewhere in the distance, a child's scream pierced the night. Raw and desperate, the curse was spreading. Lucas's fingers curled around the talisman. He could feel the warden's presence writhing inside him, an endless hunger matched only by his will to resist. In that moment, a terrifying truth settled over him like a shroud. The line between hunter and hunted had vanished. From now on, the forest nightmare lived within him, and the woods waited, hungry. The night had only just begun. The chill of dawn crept slowly over the horizon, yet the forest remained shrouded in an unsettling darkness. Lucas stood at the edge of the woods, his gaze fixed on the tangled trees that seemed to pulse with a life all their own, as if the forest itself was watching, waiting. The warden's presence within him was no longer a whisper, but a relentless roar beneath his skin. A battle he felt with every heartbeat. Eleonora approached cautiously, her eyes sharp but shadowed with worry. "You look like you've seen a ghost." Lucas forced a tight smile, but the weight inside him tightened like iron bands. "Maybe I have. Or maybe it's something worse." She nodded, stepping closer, lowering her voice. "The village's history. There are things you need to know. Things they never told you." He turned to her, suddenly desperate for answers. "Tell me everything." She took a deep breath, her gaze dropping to the ground before she began. "The warden isn't just a curse on the forest. It's a curse on the people who live near it. Generations ago, a man named Harrow was twisted by the darkness, his soul claimed by the woods. His family disappeared one by one, and the village tried to bury the truth. But the warden never died. It was bound to a stone altar deep in the forest, feeding on fear and pain. Every time someone tries to break the curse, it finds a new host. You're the latest." Lucas swallowed hard. "So this is my fate, to carry this darkness forever." Eleonora shook her head. "Not if we find the original source, the heart of the curse buried beneath the oldest tree in the forest. If we can destroy that, the warden's grip will weaken." Suddenly, a sharp rustling in the underbrush snapped their attention. Both froze, eyes scanning the shadows where something moved, quick, unnatural. From the gloom emerged a figure, draped in tattered robes, eyes glowing faintly with an otherworldly light. The stranger's voice was a hiss. "You carry the warden's mark. You cannot hide from what you are." Lucas felt the air grow heavy as the stranger stepped closer. "The forest awakens, and soon it will claim all who dwell near." Eleonora raised her blade. "Who are you?" The figure smiled coldly. "A guardian, or perhaps a herald. The end has come for your world." The forest around them seemed to close in, branches twisting like claws, shadows deepening into shapes that whispered of ancient terror. Lucas tightened his grip on the talisman, the warden's voice roaring louder, threatening to drown out his own. But this time he clenched his teeth and shouted into the void. "Not yet." The stranger's eyes gleamed brighter, a cruel smile curling his lips as if savoring a secret feast. Bold words for a boy shackled to darkness. Lucas steadied himself, feeling the weight of the talisman against his chest, a cold reminder of the battle raging within. The warden's voice, now a furious storm, clawed at his mind, trying to twist his resolve. Eleonora tightened her grip on her blade. "We don't have time for riddles. Who are you, really? And what do you want?" The stranger's gaze flickered toward the dense forest behind them. I am called Morin. I serve the will that sustains the warden's curse. The woods speak through me. A gust of wind swept through the clearing, carrying with it the scent of decay and something far darker. Fear. Shadows deepen, stretching like fingers toward Lucas and Eleonora, whispering promises of oblivion. Lucas felt his knees weaken. The voice inside him surged, hungry, demanding surrender. But beneath the hunger, a spark of defiance flared. I'm not your pawn, Lucas said, voice trembling but firm. And I won't let this forest destroy my home. Morin laughed, a sound that seemed to twist the air. Then you will die trying. Without warning, he raised a gnarled hand, and the forest around them erupted. Trees bent violently as roots snaked toward the pair, cold and relentless. Eleonora lunged, slashing at a grasping root, but more sprang up, encircling them. Lucas clenched the talisman, summoning every ounce of will to push back against the choking vines and the dark voice threatening to overtake him. Suddenly, a bright light burst from the talisman, slicing through the shadows like a blade. The roots recoiled, the strangling grasp loosening. Morin snarled, stepping back into the shadows. This is far from over, boy. The forest remembers, and it will come for you again. As Morin vanished into the thicket, the oppressive silence returned. Lucas and Eleonora stood breathless, surrounded by the fading tendrils of darkness. Lucas looked down at the talisman, its cold surface now warm against his skin. The fight was just beginning, and so was the true nightmare. The forest seemed to exhale, the suffocating grip of the roots loosening as if retreating. But the heaviness in the air lingered like a warning. Lucas steadied his breathing, heart pounding in his chest. Not from the fight just past, but from the understanding settling deep inside him. Morin was no mere wanderer. He was part of the forest's dark will, a herald of the curse that gnawed at everything Lucas held dear. Eleonora sheathed her blade, her face tight with concern. You're stronger than I thought, but this isn't over. Morin's right. The forest remembers. And it won't stop until it has you. Lucas swallowed the lump in his throat. Then I need to know everything. What did you mean about the oldest tree? The source. She glanced toward the dense woodland, shadows stretching long and ominous in the early morning light. There's a place deep inside, farther than anyone dares go. An ancient tree they call the Root Mother. It's older than the village, older than any record. Beneath it lies the altar where the curse began, where Harrow's soul was twisted and bound. Destroying that altar is the only way to break the curse. But getting there, Lucas shook his head. It sounds impossible. Eleonora's eyes hardened. Impossible or not, we have to try. If you don't, the warden will consume you, just like it did Harrow. Suddenly, the wind shifted. A low, guttural growl echoed through the trees, chilling them both. The forest wasn't just watching. They were being hunted. Lucas felt the familiar stir inside him, the warden's hunger clawing at his mind. It's inside me, he whispered. It's not just out there. Eleonora nodded, her voice dropping. That's why we need to move quickly. The longer it festers, the harder it gets to fight. They began walking into the shadowed woods, each step heavier than the last. The deeper they went, the more the forest seemed alive. Whispers in the leaves, strange shapes lurking just beyond sight, and the ever-present feeling that something followed, waiting for a moment to strike. Lucas's fingers tightened around the talisman. Every time the warden's voice surged, he fought to drown it with memories of who he was before this nightmare began. And yet, with every step, the forest's darkness pressed closer, promising that some things never forget, and some curses never end. The deeper they pressed into the forest, the heavier the air became, thick with a scent that was both earthy and rotten, like decay disguised beneath fresh leaves. The light from the sky above faded, filtered through the dense canopy, until the world was reduced to a dim, green, tinted twilight. Every crack of a twig beneath their boots seemed amplified, every rustle of the leaves a potential threat. Lucas's senses sharpened with every heartbeat, but the restless pulse in his mind, the warden's dark whisper, grew louder, an insistent drone he could barely push aside. Eleonora moved ahead, silent as a shadow, eyes scanning the brush for signs of danger. She was the steady force Lucas needed, the only person who understood the forest's cruel language. She had grown up on the edge of these woods, her knowledge of the terrain a lifeline. "We're close," she said quietly, her voice barely more than a breath. "The root mother is near. You can feel it." Lucas nodded, though inside a knot of fear tightened. What happens if we find the altar and the curse isn't broken? Eleonora stopped, turning to face him, her expression grim. Then the warden consumes everything. The village, the forest, and eventually you. The curse is hunger, and it's insatiable. A sudden chill swept through the trees, as if the woods themselves inhaled sharply, warning them to turn back. The shadows shifted and coalesced, taking shapes that toyed with the edge of Lucas's vision. Twisted faces, glimpses of hands clawing from the earth, silent screams frozen in time. Lucas felt his grip tighten on the talisman, its warmth a fleeting comfort against the cold pressing at his soul. The warden's voice rose inside him, venomous and mocking. "Give in. Stop fighting. The forest belongs to me." But Lucas's resolve hardened. He wasn't harrowed. He wouldn't fall. Suddenly, a guttural growl shattered the tense silence. From the shadows emerged a figure, hulking, unnatural, half man, half root, with eyes like burning coals. The warden's curse had sent one of its hunters. Eleonora raised her blade, positioning herself between Lucas and the creature. "Stay close," she warned. The creature lunged, roots twisting like serpents, but Eleonora met it with a fierce strike, the clash echoing like thunder through the forest. Lucas dodged behind a tree, his heart racing, the talisman pulsing against his chest like a second heartbeat. As the battle raged, Lucas knew this was only the beginning. The deeper they ventured, the more the forest would fight to keep its secrets buried, and Lucas's own shadow loomed larger with every step. Because in the woods, some darkness never dies. The forest seemed to close in tighter after the battle, as if it wanted to swallow them whole. The creature's shattered form lay tangled in roots and branches, but Lucas knew this was merely a warning, a taste of what would come if they dared press on. Every instinct screamed to turn back, but the weight of what they'd discovered anchored him forward. Eleonora's breath came in sharp bursts, her eyes scanning the dim woods with a practiced alertness. "We're almost there," she whispered, her voice strained. "The root mother's presence is thickening the air. You can feel it, can't you?" Lucas nodded, though a cold dread curled in his stomach. The talisman burned against his chest, hot enough to sear but offering no answers. "It's like the forest is alive," he said. And angry. The path narrowed, tangled with gnarled roots that snaked across the ground like sleeping serpents. Shadows flickered in the corner of his vision, shapes that vanished when he looked directly. The forest wasn't just hostile, it was watching. A sudden snap echoed, and Lucas spun around, heart pounding. Nothing moved, only silence, dense and suffocating. Then a whisper curled through the leaves, so faint he could barely catch the words. "Turn back." Eleonora stiffened beside him. "They try to scare us. The curse reaches out with voices, with fear. Don't listen." But the words burrowed deeper, an insidious chill that crept beneath his skin. Lucas's mind teetered on the edge of something fragile, between control and surrender. "What if I can't fight it?" he asked, voice low. "What if the warden wins?" Eleonora's eyes locked onto his, fierce and unwavering. "Then we all lose. You're stronger than it wants you to believe." They pressed on, each step heavier than the last until the trees parted, revealing a clearing bathed in a pale, unnatural light. At its center stood the Root Mother, a towering tree, ancient and twisted. Roots sprawling like veins into the earth, bark etched with symbols older than memory. Lucas approached cautiously, feeling the forest's pulse thrumming through the ground beneath him. The altar lay nestled among the roots, weathered stone stained dark, a remnant of a ritual that birthed the curse. As he reached out to touch the altar, a voice whispered behind him. Soft, mournful, and haunting. "Leave this place." Lucas turned sharply, but the clearing was empty. The shadows seemed to breathe, shifting and alive. He felt the warden's hunger surge inside him, clawing for release. With a deep breath, Lucas steadied his hand and laid the talisman on the altar. The air snapped, cold and electric. The forest held its breath, and then silence. But it was the silence that was most terrifying of all. The silence stretched, thick and suffocating, as if the forest itself was holding its breath, waiting, watching, deciding their fate. Lucas's fingers trembled as they hovered over the talisman resting on the ancient altar, its carved surface cold and unyielding beneath his touch. The eerie glow from the Root Mother's gnarled limbs cast long shadows that flickered like specters, dancing in the dim light. "Did you feel that?" Eleonora whispered, her voice barely audible over the rustling leaves. Lucas nodded, swallowing hard. The forest's heartbeat seemed to pulse in sync with his own. Slow and steady, then suddenly erratic. Something was awakening deep beneath the earth, something that had been waiting, hungry and patient. A low rumble began to grow, vibrating through the soil and into their bones. The ground trembled beneath their feet as ancient roots, red like serpents, shifting and twisting with a sinister life. The air thickened, growing dense and heavy with the scent of earth and decay. Before Lucas could pull his hand away, the altar pulsed with an unnatural light, searing a line of fire into the skin of his palm. He cried out, stumbling backward, clutching the pain that blossomed like wildfire. The talisman's glow flared, and the Root Mother seemed to pulse with renewed vigor, its bark groaning and splitting. Eleonora grabbed his arm, steadying him. "The curse, it's fighting back." The voice inside Lucas's head, the warden's voice, rose in a cruel crescendo, twisting his thoughts into shadows. "You cannot undo what was never meant to be undone. The forest is mine." Tearing his gaze from the altar, Lucas caught sight of movement at the edge of the clearing. Figures emerged from the shadows, faces pale and eyes hollow. The villagers. But these weren't the people he'd known. These were twisted versions, bodies half swallowed by roots. Mouths stitched with bark, silent and unmoving, as if trapped between worlds. One of them stepped forward, its gaze locked on Lucas with a hollow, accusing stare. "You shouldn't be here," it said, voice cracked and cold. Lucas's breath hitched, his mind racing to understand how the curse had spread so far, how the forest had claimed these souls. "We have to break this," Eleonora said, gripping her blade tighter. "Before it's too late." The ground beneath them groaned, as the Root Mother's branches reached out like claws, tendrils of darkness creeping toward the altar, hungry to reclaim their power. Lucas clenched his jaw, the pain in his hand fading, but replaced by a burning resolve. If the forest wanted to fight, they would fight back. But in this cursed place, every step forward could be the last. The air grew colder, heavier, as if the forest itself was drawing in a slow, agonizing breath, ready to exhale a horror so deep it could drown the soul. Lucas stared at the villagers. No, the husks they had become, half-rooted, half-human, trapped in some limbo between life and death. Their hollow eyes held a silent accusation, an echo of all the suffering the curse had wrought. One of them took a step closer, a thin, gnarled hand reaching toward Lucas. The bark cracked and shifted, as if the forest's grip was tightening, binding more than just flesh and bone. Lucas's heart slammed against his ribs. He wanted to run, to scream, But the weight of the talisman at his chest was a tether pulling him forward, toward the altar, toward a fate he didn't fully understand, but couldn't ignore. Eleanora's voice cut through the dread, sharp and fierce. This is why the curse won't end. It feeds on fear, on regret. It traps souls, twists them until there's nothing left. We have to free them. Lucas swallowed his terror. How? She knelt beside the altar, brushing dirt away with trembling fingers. This place, it's the root of everything. The ritual that began the curse was never finished. The root mother was meant to be bound, sealed. But someone stopped before it was complete. A cold wind swept through the clearing, carrying whispers of sorrow and rage. The forest's hunger pressed in, relentless. Lucas's mind raced. If the ritual could be finished, if the curse could be ended, would it free the trapped souls? Or would it unleash something worse? Suddenly, the altar cracked, a jagged fissure splitting the stone. From the darkness below, a pulse of black tendrils surged upward, reaching for them like desperate hands. Now, Eleanora commanded, pulling a worn leather, bound book from her pack, the ancient grimoire of the village's forgotten lore. Lucas steadied himself, the talisman blazing bright against his skin. Together, they began to chant in a language lost to time, voices trembling but unwavering. The forest responded with a violent shudder. The trapped villagers writhed, half-rotted roots peeling from their mouths, eyes flickering with faint sparks of life. But the root mother screamed, a deep, shattering howl that tore through the canopy, shaking the very earth. Branches whipped violently, the clearing turning into a maelstrom of nature's fury. Lucas felt his resolve falter, pain burning through his chest as the curse fought to hold its claim. And then, in the heart of the storm, a single, blinding light erupted from the altar. The forest fell silent. The trapped souls collapsed to the earth, free at last, their eyes clear but vacant. The root mother's massive form began to wither, bark cracking and leaves falling like ash. Lucas sank to his knees, chest heavy. The curse was broken, or so it seemed. A voice echoed, cold and hollow, from the shadows beyond the clearing. This is only the beginning. The voice, barely more than a whisper carried on the wind, clung to the edges of the clearing like a shadow that refused to fade. Lucas's breath caught, the fragile calm shattered by that single phrase. This is only the beginning. The forest seemed to hold its breath again, dark and silent, as if waiting for what would come next. He scanned the tree line, eyes straining to pierce the gloom. No shape emerged. Only the cold, unmoving silhouettes of trees, their branches gnarled like skeletal fingers. The wind had died, and an unnatural stillness spread over the woods. A silence so thick it pressed into his skin, invading his thoughts. Eleanora stood beside him, face pale but steady. "We've finished the ritual," she said quietly. "The root mother's grip is broken. The souls are free." But that voice, Lucas said, shaking his head, it wasn't human. It sounded ancient. She nodded slowly, eyes narrowing. "The curse is older than any of us, older than this village. Breaking one part only wakes something darker beneath it." Lucas felt the weight of her words settle like a stone in his gut. He looked down at his injured hand, the talisman dull now, its light extinguished. The sense of safety the ritual had promised was slipping away. A sudden rustle from the shadows made both of them freeze. Lucas's fingers instinctively wrapped around a fallen branch, ready to defend, but nothing appeared. Just silence again. "We need to get out of here," Eleanora urged. "Before the forest decides to fight back." Lucas nodded, every instinct screaming to flee. But then his eyes caught something strange on the ground. A faint trail of ash leading deeper into the woods, like a thin scar across the moss. He traced the path with his gaze. "What's that?" Eleanora frowned. "Ash fire. But no one's supposed to light fires in these woods." A chill crept over Lucas's spine. The ash seemed fresh, scattered deliberately. like a message. They exchanged a glance, the unspoken truth hanging between them. The curse might be broken, but the forest was far from done. It was watching, waiting, ready to pull them back into its depths. Lucas took a hesitant step forward, the trail beckoning him into the darkness beyond the clearing. Somewhere out there, answers waited. Or perhaps something worse. The forest whispered its invitation, and he wasn't sure if he could refuse. The ash trail curled like a pale serpent into the forest's depths. Each step Lucas took crunching softly beneath his boots. The air had shifted. Gone was the cold bitterness of the clearing, replaced by a strange, heavy warmth that felt almost alive. It pressed against his skin, thick and suffocating, like the forest was breathing, watching, waiting to reveal its darkest secrets. Eleonora moved beside him, her eyes sharp and wary, fingers twitching near the old knife strapped to her belt. Neither spoke, the weight of the silence between them growing heavier with every step. Lucas's mind spun with questions. What had whispered in the shadows? Who, or what, had left the ash? The villagers were free now, or so they thought. But something deeper stirred beneath the roots, something that hadn't been broken by a simple ritual. The phrase echoed relentlessly in his head, "This is only the beginning." The trees closed in tighter, their branches clawing at the sky like desperate hands trying to trap the moonlight. The forest floor, once littered with familiar ferns and moss, now looked scorched, the ash coating every stone and fallen leaf. It was unnatural, sinister. Suddenly, the trail split. Lucas stopped, heart pounding. To the left, the ash vanished into a dense thicket, darkness pooling beneath twisted branches. To the right, a faint glow flickered, like firelight, distant but unmistakable. Eleonora glanced at him, voice barely audible. Which way? Neither option felt safe, but something pulled Lucas toward the light, a primal curiosity tangled with dread. They moved cautiously, the glow growing brighter until it revealed a small clearing where an old stone well yawned, crumbling with age but unmistakably real. Smoke curled from within, thin and black, spiraling upward like a serpent rising from the depths below. Lucas leaned over the rim, peering into the darkness beneath. The well seemed bottomless, swallowing all light. From its depths, the faintest sound reached his ears, a soft, rhythmic tapping like fingernails against stone. A shiver ran down his spine. Eleonora whispered, "That sound, it's a warning." Then the tapping stopped. The silence that followed was absolute. Suddenly, a hand burst from the darkness below, pale, twisted, grasping desperately for the surface. Lucas stumbled back, breath catching in his throat. Eleonora grabbed his arm. "We're not alone down here." The well seemed to pulse, alive with something ancient and hungry. The forest wasn't done playing its deadly game. Lucas knew, with a sinking certainty, that the true horror was still waiting in the shadows, watching, ready to pull them down into the darkness below. And this time, it wouldn't let go. The hand, thin, almost skeletal, clenched at the edge of the well, dragging itself upward with a frantic desperation. Lucas felt his breath hitch, frozen by the raw terror in that motion. The skin was pale, almost translucent, stretched taut over knobby bones. It wasn't human, not anymore. Eleonora's grip tightened on his arm, her face pale but determined. "We need to stop whatever this is before it climbs out." But how? The well was ancient, forgotten by everyone except the forest, and now it was a doorway. The tapping had returned faster, more urgent, a slow, uneven beat that echoed from the depths. The air grew thick with the smell of damp earth and something fouler beneath it. Decay, rot, something dead but not resting. Lucas swallowed hard and searched his pockets for anything that might help. Nothing but a small lighter and a shard of broken glass. He flicked the lighter. The tiny flame wavered in the stagnant air. The darkness below swallowed the light almost immediately, as if the abyss was hungry for hope. From the shadows, a voice, a whisper this time, slithered upward, You should not have come." Eleonora's eyes darted around, searching the tree line, but no one was there. The voice was everywhere and nowhere, seeping from the cracks in the stone, from the roots around them, from the very air. Lucas's pulse hammered in his ears. "Who's there?" His voice trembled. Silence. Then a sudden rush of cold wind, as if the forest exhaled a breath of frost. The hand inched higher, dragging wet, muddy fingers along the stone's edge. Eleonora raised her knife, the blade catching the faint glow of the lighter. We'll cut it down. Before it rises. The hand slipped over the rim. Then another followed, then an arm, twisted and slick with grime. The creature that emerged was not human, its eyes hollow and black, mouth stretched in a silent scream that chilled Lucas to his core. The forest seemed to hold its breath, waiting to see what they would do next. Lucas felt a surge of defiance. He stepped forward, lighter held high, flicking it toward the creature. The flame caught its eyes, and for a moment, they flared with an unholy light. The creature hissed and recoiled, retreating into the well's depths. But before it disappeared, it whispered again, this time clear and sharp, like a blade cutting the night air. "This is only the beginning." Lucas and Eleonora exchanged a grim glance. The nightmare had only just begun. The echo of the creature's warning lingered in the cold night air, mingling with the soft rustle of leaves and the distant calls of unseen animals. Lucas's hands trembled as he stared into the yawning darkness of the well, heart pounding with a mix of fear and disbelief. What kind of nightmare had they stumbled upon? One that clawed its way out from beneath the earth, speaking in voices meant only to haunt the living. Eleonora wiped sweat from her brow, her breath shallow but steady. "We can't just stand here," she said, voice low but fierce. "We need to know what we're dealing with." Lucas nodded. Though every instinct screamed to run, to escape this place before it swallowed them whole. Yet something deeper, the strange bond they'd felt since stepping into the forest, held him rooted. "We have to find out where it came from. If this is the beginning, then there must be more." The forest seemed to lean in closer, shadows twisting and thickening, as if listening. Lucas recalled the old stories, whispered by the village elders around dying fires. Tales of a darkness trapped beneath the ground, held back only by ancient rites and forgotten promises. But promises were broken. The earth had cracked, and whatever lived below was waking. They decided to follow the ash trail, hoping it might lead them to the source. Step by cautious step, the forest grew darker. Denser the trees towered, their gnarled branches blotting out what little moonlight filtered through. An oppressive silence wrapped around them. No rustling leaves, no animal calls, only the crunch of their footsteps and the steady, faint tapping that now seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. Suddenly, Eleonora halted, fingers pressed against her lips. A soft voice, a child's voice, floated on the breeze, singing a lullaby, sweet but twisted, hauntingly out of place. Lucas's blood ran cold. That voice, it's from the stories. The lost children. Eleonora's eyes widened. They say the forest takes them, one by one, and they never come back. Their voices lure others in. The lullaby grew louder, wrapping around them like a shroud. The ash underfoot began to shift, revealing bones, small, delicate, unmistakably human. The Lucas swallowed hard. The forest was not just alive, it was hungry. From the shadows a figure emerged, a girl, pale and thin, eyes wide and empty. Her lips moved, still singing that chilling song. Lucas reached out, heart aching. "Who are you? What do you want?" The girl stopped singing and tilted her head, voice barely a whisper. "Come home." The ground trembled beneath their feet. The trees seemed to close ranks. The forest had begun to claim them. And somewhere deep below, the darkness stirred, waiting for its moment to rise again. The girl's hollow eyes locked onto Lucas's, and for a heartbeat, the forest fell utterly silent. No wind, no rustle. No distant animal cry, only the faint, haunting echo of her lullaby fading into the night. It wasn't just a song, it was a summons, an invitation threaded with something ancient and terrible. Eleonora gripped Lucas's arm. We shouldn't have come here. But stepping back wasn't an option. The ground beneath them seemed to pulse like a heartbeat, subtle but unmistakable. The bones underfoot, a grim reminder of those who had vanished, were not scattered by time but arranged, as if placed with intent. Lucas knelt, brushing ash away to reveal a small wooden pendant, shaped like a twisted tree. The pendant felt cold in his palm, heavier than its size suggested, as though it carried the weight of countless secrets. Suddenly, the girl's voice shifted, no longer childlike, but a rasping whisper from the depths of some forgotten grave. Find the root, or fall. The words seeped into the night, chilling Lucas to his core. What root? He murmured, glancing around. The forest's shadows deepened, as if swallowing his question whole. Eleonora scanned the dense thicket ahead, where twisted branches curled toward the sky like grasping hands. The tree, the one they warned us about. A memory flickered in Lucas's mind, an old tale from the village, spoken in hushed tones. A colossal tree, older than the land itself. Its roots tangled deep beneath the earth, imprisoning a darkness so profound it could unravel the world. But over time, those roots weakened. The darkness stirred beneath them, reaching out like a predator. As if on cue, the ground trembled again, more violently this time, and the girl's figure dissolved into mist, leaving only the echo of her lullaby to haunt the air. Lucas stood, resolve hardening inside him. We have to find that tree, before whatever's down there breaks free. Eleonora nodded, her eyes reflecting the faint glow of the pendant in his hand. But we're not the only ones searching. A sudden rustling erupted from the shadows behind them. Shapes moved swiftly, too fast to be animals, too deliberate to be the wind. From the darkness emerged figures cloaked in tattered robes, their faces hidden beneath heavy hoods. They moved with purpose, surrounding Lucas and Eleonora like a tightening noose. One stepped forward, voice low and gravelly. The forest has chosen its hunters. Leave now, or be consumed. Lucas met the stranger's gaze, the pendant burning cold against his palm. We're not leaving until we know the truth. The robed figure's eyes glinted in the moonlight. Then prepare yourself. The woods have a way of making sure the truth is the last thing you see. With that, they vanished back into the shadows, leaving behind an ominous warning, and a path that would lead Lucas and Eleonora deeper, into the heart of a nightmare that refused to end. The robed figures melted into the shadows like smoke swallowed by the night, leaving Lucas and Eleonora standing on the edge of something far darker and more dangerous than either had imagined. The cold pendant burned faintly in Lucas's hand, as if alive with the weight of centuries. For a moment, silence pressed down on them like a shroud. Then Eleonora whispered, "They weren't just warning us. They were hunting for the same thing." Lucas's mind raced. If these people were guardians, or worse, jailers, of whatever darkness lurked beneath the forest, then their arrival meant the seals were breaking faster than anyone had dared to admit. "We can't trust anyone," Lucas said, voice low. "Not even the villagers." Eleonora's face tightened with grim determination. "Then it's up to us. We find the tree. We find the root. And we end this." They plunged deeper into the forest, the pendant guiding them like a beacon against the encroaching shadows. The air grew heavier with every step, thick with the scent of damp earth and decay. The trees seemed to lean closer, their branches scratching like claws, whispering secrets too terrible to hear. As they walked, the world shifted. The very ground beneath them groaned and shifted, and the whispers grew louder, echoing from the darkness below. Suddenly, Eleonora froze. Look. Ahead, a colossal tree stood, ancient beyond reckoning. Its bark was twisted and scarred, roots gnarled and sprawling like serpents. The pendant pulsed wildly in Lucas's hand. "This is it," he said, voice trembling. The root they spoke of. But as they approached, the earth trembled violently. From the depths beneath the tree, a sickly green glow seeped through cracks in the soil, and a low, guttural growl rolled through the air. The forest seemed to hold its breath as something immense stirred below. The darkness was waking, hungry, and furious. Lucas and Eleonora exchanged a look, knowing that what came next would test every ounce of their courage, and that the fate of everything they knew rested on their next move. The moment the eerie glow seeped from the earth, the air around Lucas and Eleonora thickened like a tightening noose. The ground trembled beneath their feet with a slow, grinding groan, as if the forest itself was awakening from a long, suffocating slumber. Lucas gripped the pendant tighter, feeling the cold weight anchor him amidst the rising chaos. Suddenly, the roots sprawling around the massive tree writhed as though possessed, twisting and coiling with unnatural life. Their bark cracked, revealing jagged edges that gleamed with an oily blackness, something ancient and venomous lurking beneath the surface. The roots moved faster, snaking toward them, a sinister promise of entrapment. Eleonora moved. Lucas shouted, yanking her backward, just as a root shot past where they'd been standing a second before. The forest's whispering grew into a low chant, a sound that burrowed into their bones, rattling their very souls. "Do you feel it?" Eleonora gasped, eyes wide and trembling. "It's like the forest itself is alive and angry." Lucas nodded, swallowing his fear. "It's more than angry. It's desperate." A sudden rush of cold wind slammed into them, and from the shadows stepped the robed figures again. Their hoods fell back, revealing faces pale as death, eyes sunken and sharp as knives. They moved with deliberate steps, their gazes locked on the trembling tree. One of them raised a hand, and the ground stilled immediately. The roots retracted as if respecting an invisible boundary. The robed leader's voice cut through the night, grave and commanding. "This is the heart of the curse. The root binds the darkness beneath, but it weakens. Tonight, we must strengthen the seal, or all will be lost." Lucas's mind reeled. The curse, the darkness, they weren't just stumbling into some forgotten legend. They had walked into a war between forces old as time, forces that thrived on fear and suffering. "Why involve us?" Lucas demanded. "Why send warnings if you want us gone?" The leader's eyes flickered with something unreadable. "Because you carry the mark. The pendant you hold is the key, a relic from those who first trapped this evil. Without it, the seal cannot hold." Lucas glanced at the pendant again, its twisted tree shape now glowing faintly, pulsing in rhythm with the earth beneath them. The weight of it pressed not just on his palm, but on his very being. "What must we do?" Eleonora asked, voice barely above a whisper. The leader stepped closer, voice low and urgent. "You must descend. Enter the root's hollow, the gateway to the darkness below. There you will find the source, a shadow older than memory. You must face it, or it will consume everything." A cold dread coiled in Lucas's gut. He glanced at Eleonora, her face pale but resolute. "We don't have a choice," he said. The leader nodded. "No one ever does." As the robed figures began the ancient chant again, the roots parted like great doors, revealing a yawning tunnel carved from the heart of the tree itself. Darkness beyond darkness beckoned, a void that promised nothing but despair. Lucas took a shaky breath and stepped forward, Eleonora close behind. The forest watched in silence, the night holding its breath as they vanished into the black maw of the root. The darkness inside the hollow was unlike anything Lucas had ever experienced. It swallowed the weak beam of his flashlight like a living thing, pressing against him from all sides. The air was damp and heavy, thick with the scent of rot and something far fuller, something that clawed at his senses and tried to pull him under. Behind him, Eleonora's footsteps echoed softly, a fragile sound in the suffocating black. The pendant around his neck throbbed faintly. Its cold pulse a steady reminder that this was no ordinary journey. This was a descent into a nightmare. Every step deeper into the root felt like crossing a boundary, stepping further away from the world he knew and into something ancient, hostile, and utterly alien. The walls of the hollow twisted and curved in impossible angles, as though the tree itself was warping reality to keep its secret safe. Suddenly, the faint glow returned, this time from beneath their feet. The ground cracked open, revealing a pit swirling with mist and shadows that wreathed like living smoke. Lucas's heart hammered, pounding against his ribs as if trying to escape. From that pit, a voice emerged. Low, guttural, dripping with malice. It slithered into their minds, an unwelcome whisper promising ruin and torment. "Why do you come?" It hissed, voice echoing off the walls like a chorus of the damned. "This place is mine. Leave or be consumed." Lucas gritted his teeth, clutching the pendant tighter. "We don't come as intruders," he said, voice steady despite the fear clawing at his throat. "We'll come to end what you started." A terrible laugh echoed around them, a sound that cracked and splintered the very air. The shadows surged, shaping themselves into grotesque forms that twisted and writhed in the dim light. Eleonora stepped forward, eyes blazing with fierce determination. "You will not escape. Not tonight." The root's hollow became a battleground of light and shadow, hope and despair. Every breath felt like a struggle, every moment a fight to hold on to humanity in a place where darkness tried to erase it. And yet, amid the terror, Lucas felt a spark, a fragile thread of something old and powerful stirring within him. The pendant pulsed stronger, its cold light cutting through the shadows, a beacon of resistance. The darkness recoiled, snarling in fury. This was only the beginning. The air grew colder with every step deeper into the tunnel, the shadows seeming to pulse and breathe like they had their own life. Lucas's fingers tightened around the pendant, its subtle warmth contrasting the chilling dread that seeped into his bones. Eleonora's flashlight flickered, threatening to die, as though the darkness itself sought to snuff out any glimmer of hope. Suddenly, the tunnel opened into a vast chamber, its ceiling lost in blackness. The walls were lined with gnarled roots twisted into grotesque shapes, like hands grasping for salvation. In the center stood an altar carved from ancient wood, slick with dark stains that looked disturbingly like dried blood. Lucas swallowed hard. The pendant's glow grew stronger, its pale light casting eerie shadows that danced across the chamber. Something ancient, forgotten by time, waited here. A cold voice sliced through the silence. "You should not have come." From the shadows, a figure emerged, tall and gaunt, face obscured by a mask fashioned from bark and bone. Its eyes gleamed with a cruel light, promising unspeakable horrors. This was the guardian of the darkness, the eternal warden of the curse. Eleonora stepped beside Lucas, her voice steady despite the quiver in her heart. "We're here to end this." The figure laughed, a sound that scraped like metal on stone. "End? You mistake my purpose. I am the forest's vengeance, the shadow that punishes those who forget. The root feeds on fear, and tonight, it will feast." Suddenly, the altar erupted with a sickly green light, tendrils of shadow twisting upward like smoke in a storm. The roots lining the walls writhed, reaching out toward them like hungry serpents. Lucas gritted his teeth and stepped forward, raising the pendant high. Its light cut through the darkness, burning away the tendrils inch by inch, but the guardian advanced, moving faster than human eyes could follow. Time seemed to stretch and warp. The chamber was a maelstrom of light and shadow, life and death entwined in a deadly dance. Then, in a flash, the pendant shattered, sending shards of cold light scattering like stars across the chamber. The guardian's mask cracked, revealing not a monster, but a woman's face twisted in agony. Her eyes met Lucas's, filled with sorrow and warning. The root is not what you think. And just like that, the shadows swallowed them whole. The suffocating darkness crashed over Lucas like a tidal wave, dragging him down into a void that chilled his soul. Yet, somewhere beneath the crushing weight, a faint light pulsed in his chest. The lingering warmth of the broken pendant's shards, remnants of a power far greater than fear or shadow. The woman's anguished face flickered before his eyes, her voice a desperate whisper carried on the stale air. The root feeds on more than fear. It feeds on regret, on the sins buried deep in the heart. Slowly, the shadows began to thin, unraveling like smoke caught in a breeze. Lucas gasped as the chamber around them returned. The altar cracked and bleeding dark sap that shimmered like tears. The woman, the guardian, was gone, leaving behind only a fading echo of sorrow. Eleonora's voice trembled. What does it mean? How do we stop it? Lucas touched the cold, jagged pieces of the shattered pendant in his palm. Each shard held a memory, a story of those who had fallen to the root's curse over centuries. Lost souls trapped in an endless cycle of guilt and torment. This isn't just a battle against a creature. It's a battle against the darkness inside us all, Lucas said, eyes stealing with new resolve. To break the root's hold, we need to face what we've buried deep, our fears, our regrets. Only then can we cut the root from its source. The tunnel behind them trembled, the forest itself groaning as if awakening from a nightmare. Above ground, the first fragile light of dawn brushed the treetops, promising a new day but carrying the weight of a deeper, darker night yet to come. Lucas and Eleonora stepped forward, leaving the shattered altar behind. The journey was far from over. If anything, it had just begun. Because some darkness doesn't just live in the woods. It lives in the silence between our thoughts, in the moments we dare not speak aloud. And the root was waiting.